World News Tonight this Thursday, the president's trial in the Senate. He is referred to as a cancer on the body politic.
We are here today because President William Jefferson Clinton decided to put himself above the law. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly.
The Senate as jury. Will this presentation change any minds? Will witnesses make a difference? The pressure to call them is mounting.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Reporting tonight from Washington.
Good evening. The president's impeachment trial in the Senate is at full throttle now. This afternoon, the Republican team began to present chapter and verse why they believe the president is absolutely, unequivocally guilty of obstructing justice and perjury and should therefore be removed from office. There's a lot of ground to cover tonight, so first let's get right to the Capitol and ABC's Linda Douglas.
House Judiciary Chairman Henry Hyde focused on the perjury charge, playing to the senators' sense of history and to their belief that a sworn oath is sacred. He reminded them of how England's Sir Thomas More told his daughter 450 years ago that he had chosen to be executed rather than swear to a false oath.
When a man takes an oath, Meg, he's holding his own self in his hands, like water. And if he opens his fingers then, he needn't hope to find himself again.
The House manager's overarching message on the perjury charge was that failure to convict the president could lead to widespread lying in courts around the country.
Members of the Senate, what you do over the next few weeks will forever affect the meaning of those two words, I do.
Our entire legal system is based upon the courts being able to find the truth.
Truth-telling is the single most important judicial precept underpinning this great system of justice we have.
But when the managers began reciting the familiar allegations against the president, sometimes repeating each other, some of the senators got restless. One began organizing his desk drawer, another took his pulse, and still another was seen popping jelly beans. And all day long, behind the scenes, a partisan battle over whether to call witnesses was brewing. The Democratic Senate leader accused some Republicans of secretly plotting with House managers on calling witnesses, even though the Senate had agreed to put that decision off.
Well, I'm very disappointed and somewhat surprised that there has been that kind of activity this early. It certainly violates the spirit of the agreement that we just all agreed to last week.
And today, for the first time, there was serious talk among Republican senators over whether and how to get the president to testify. One said Mr. Clinton could be forced to appear.
I think ultimately the Senate does have the power under the impeachment rules to compel the president to come in.
Now, most Republican senators don't want to go that far. They don't want to have that kind of battle, but some do want to invite him to come. GOP strategist says that has the potential to embarrass the president if he declines. And Peter, tonight the Republican Party is out taking a poll to see if the country wants the president to testify.
Thanks, Linda, very much. Linda Douglas on Capitol Hill. It is certainly true, as Linda indicates in her report, that in their opening statements, Congressman Hyde and Sensenbrenner were somewhat prone to the sweeping phrase about justice and the good of the nation. But then came Congressman Asa Hutchinson from the president's own state, Arkansas, to argue in very precise detail that the president had obstructed justice on numerous occasions. And as ABC's Jackie Judd reports, he also made the most compelling case today for calling witnesses.
Congressman Hutchinson outlined the obstruction charges like an aggressive courtroom prosecutor giving a summation.
And here the answer is what is critical for my point.
Repeatedly, he linked events, created timelines of visits to the White House, of telephone calls among key players, all trying to prove that Mr. Clinton deliberately and illegally set out to conceal his relationship with Monica Lewinsky.
He was willing to obstruct, impede justice by improperly influencing a witness.
For example, Hutchinson tried to show how efforts to get Lewinsky a job intensified after the president learned she had been subpoenaed in the Paula Jones case. Eventually, Lewinsky signed a false affidavit in that case and got a job. All of this allegedly orchestrated by the president's good friend, Vernon Jordan.
What happened? Things happened. He made things happen. Monica Lewinsky got a job. The affidavit was signed, and the president was informed by Mr. Jordan through Betty Curry that the mission was accomplished.
Hutchinson, acknowledging his conclusions do not square with Jordan's testimony, challenged the Senate to help set the record straight by calling Jordan as a witness.
If we had Mr. Jordan on the witness stand, which I hope to be able to call Mr. Jordan, you would need to probe where his loyalties lie, listen to the tone of his voice, look into his eyes, and determine the truthfulness of his statements.
He acknowledged as well that the testimony of Betty Curry and Lewinsky were at odds about who called whom to collect and hide the gifts Mr. Clinton had given the young woman. Hutchinson's solution: call them in too, especially Lewinsky.
If you say in your mind, well, I'm not going to believe her, then you should first give us the opportunity to present this witness so that you as jurors could fairly and honestly determine her credibility.
Anticipating the White House will rely heavily on Lewinsky's grand jury testimony that no one ever asked her to lie or promised her a job for her silence, Hutchinson said the president never had to be explicit. He only needed to suggest, because Lewinsky understood what Mr. Clinton expected. Peter?
Thank you very much, Jackie Judd. The White House says the president did not watch the trial today. The mantra is he's doing the nation's business. ABC's Sam Donaldson is over there at the White House tonight. Sam?
Well, that's right, Peter. This may be the prosecution's day, but this White House knows better than anyone the necessity of putting their side of the story before the public in the same news cycle. So late this afternoon, Jim Kennedy, the spokesperson here for various scandals, stepped before the cameras.
The House Republican managers have begun to lay out a case that is both unsubstantiated and circumstantial. The reality is there is no case for removal of the president. We look forward to presenting a defense that is based on the facts, the law, and the Constitution.
Officials here also complain that the Republicans are misrepresenting the testimony in the House. They say that when Charles Ruff, the president's counsel, was asked by James Sensenbrenner whether the president had told the truth in the grand jury, that Ruff had said yes, he thought he had. Although Sensenbrenner told the Senate today, they say, and this is in the record, that the Ruff didn't answer the question. And as you point out, Peter, the president isn't watching. He was going to go to New York tonight, but there's an ice storm here, so he's still staying home.
Sam, I know the public agenda there tonight, but as you talk to the president's men and women tonight, do you find anything that they think hurt them today?
Well, you have to pick this up almost by osmosis. I don't think they believe that the phrases about the rule of law and the Senate's duty, important as they may be, have hurt them. But when Asa Hutchinson starts laying out the case methodically and say the president made this call and he made this statement according to witnesses, if there's any harm to be done from today's testimony, it comes from that.
Thank you, Sam. In other words, the cumulative weight of evidence. Just ahead, we'll ask that question of several others. Anything happened today to change the conventional wisdom about how this trial might turn out?
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Nicoderm CQ.
Today's session in the Senate here in Washington didn't end all that long ago, and in the intervening period, we've had several people reporting the story on Capitol Hill, including our resident analyst Bill Kristol, Cokie Roberts, and our legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Let me go to Bill Kristol first. Bill, some people were struck today by, as I said a moment ago, the cumulative weight of the evidence being laid out today. As you talk to Republicans on the Hill, impressed, not impressed, about the same?
Pretty impressed. I couldn't talk to Republican senators. They've been in the chamber since pretty much steadily since 1 p.m. Republican staff were pleased by the day. They did feel the weight of the evidence might make a difference, not in persuading Democratic senators that the president should be removed from office, but that witnesses were necessary. The one word you hear from every Republican you talk to within the first 10 seconds of the conversation is witnesses. It's the promised land for Republicans. They may be putting excessive hopes in witnesses, but it's the one thing they think could really change the dynamics and jolt some Democrats into considering removing the president.
Do any of those Republicans you've talked to today think they have a better shot at witnesses today than they had yesterday?
Yes, Peter, they do. They do because, especially with Mr. Hutchinson's presentation late in the day, the weight of the evidence, the conflicts in testimony make it a little hard, I think, they think, for Democratic senators to say, well, we know enough, we don't need witnesses.
Bill, thanks very much. Bill Kristol. Cokie Roberts is with us on Capitol Hill. Cokie, as you look at the numbers, unless this is to be hopelessly partisan, Republicans need Democratic cooperation on this. Will they get it?
Well, they don't need Democratic cooperation on the question of calling witnesses because they only need 51 senators and there are 55 of them. And I think, though, that Bill is quite right that there was a strong case made today for calling witnesses. There are not that many people with open minds sitting on the Senate floor. They're sitting and listening, but most of their minds are made up. But I think that they could convince some Democrats to come along on this witness question.
Are you then fairly convinced at the end of this day, based on this argument, or were you convinced before that witnesses are going to be inevitable?
I think witnesses are very likely. There are some Republicans who said before today that they were wary of witnesses. They're likely to change their minds.
And what do you pick out one thing you think that will have changed their minds today, if you can?
I would agree that Asa Hutchinson's presentation, again, familiar to many of us who have followed the case, not that familiar to people who have had other things to do, seeing that pattern of and that record of meetings, phone calls among the president, Vernon Jordan, Betty Curry, Monica Lewinsky, and the head of Revlon, it gets your attention, Peter.
Thanks, Koki, very much. Let's add one legal voice to this tonight, to the political analyst. ABC's Jeffrey Toobin is with us. On the basis of evidence that might lead to witnesses today, what did you hear?
Well, I heard a very impressive presentation by Asa Hutchinson, as we discussed before. Also, at the end of the day, Congressman Rogan from California also made a powerful case that witnesses needed to be called. But also, I was in the chamber at the end of the day, and that was an exhausted United States Senate. They did not like sitting there all day long, and I think they're not going to have their constituents demanding this trial be extended, and I think they may be looking for ways to shorten this as well.
Thank you all very much, Jeffrey Toobin, Bill Kristol, and Koki Roberts. When we come back, why such a drop in the stock market? And a major American city, not very far from here. Why do the murder suspects go free without a trial?